Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I am Jason Bermas, sitting in for Alex Jones, who's on assignment in Dallas. We're with Catherine Austin Fitz, and you were talking about really the restructuring of the global economy and the economy here at home. How do you feel the SDR, or Special Drawing Rights Unit, that the IMF is now really issuing fervently, fits into all that? Is this the global currency that they plan to replace the dollar with? Because there's all this talk that the dollar can no longer be the world reserve currency, and it would seem that although this hasn't taken a physical form yet, that may be the next step.
Well, there are a couple things happening at once, Jason. The first is there is tremendous tension between the financial really speculative economy and the real economy. And if you look at the countries and the organizations trying to implement trade around the world, it's very painful to be trying to move bananas from here to there when the currency or securities you're operating with to manage a real business have become really a tool of financial speculation and economic warfare. So we see tremendous demands by countries that are focused on real export and real trade, trying to find a way to transact and manage reserves in a way that's good for their real economy and get away from the financial speculation. Mm-hmm. So there's a demand for a global currency that's outside the global speculation system. That's one. Number two, there's no doubt there's a desire also to get off the dollar because the dollar's in a long-term decline. And what the dollar has become is, in one sense, is a form of global taxation through the balance sheets. So countries around the world buy dollars, they go down in value, and literally it's a taxation system. So there's a real desire for something, one, that's global, that's two, that's outside of the speculation, and three, is not going down in value. And that's part of what you're seeing with the SDRs and the movement to a global currency. But the other thing, what we're seeing is we're just seeing a desire for people to have something that's not going down, which is part of what's pushing the price of gold and silver and the precious metals up a lot in the last couple of months.
Mm-hmm. So what does the United States look like once the dollar is dumped as the world reserve currency? Is this literally the death of the dollar and we would need some kind of other currency in the United States? Would this trigger even a deeper depression? I know that Obama's talking about a double dip recession, which to me is just a semantical word game to say, hey, things aren't going to get any better. They dare not use the term depression. But if the dollar is taken away as the global reserve currency, does it survive? And what happens here in the United States?
Well, I don't think we're going through a depression or recession. I think we're going through, I call it a financial coup d'etat. Mm-hmm. So I think what you're watching is a fundamental re-engineering of how the world is governed, and it's intentional and it's planned. Now, it happens in organic ways. It's not as though it's perfectly scripted. Mm-hmm. But we're going through a fundamental change, and the decision to basically reduce the middle class to a much more, to a much lower income with much less political power lifestyle was an intentional decision made in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And essentially what has happened is you have one or two generations in the United States that built up huge wealth over their lifetime, and what we saw was that wealth transferred out of the economy and abroad during the 90s, sort of hidden behind the bubble. But that's an intentional thing, and so when we talk about this in terms of depression and recession, we're talking about business cycles, and that's not really the traditional. We're not watching a traditional business cycle. We're watching a fundamental re-engineering of and centralization of economic and political control, and it's very much global and very planned out. Let me give you an example. I was in London in 2002 to give a paper on, it's called The Myth of the Rule of Law, about the sort of how the process of privatization was working here in the United States and how things were, basically criminal enterprises being used to centralize all sorts of ownership and control in real estate into a relatively small group of people. And I gave the paper, and following me there was a former reporter from the Wall Street Journal giving a paper about the sort of economic warfare in Russia during the 90s. and then followed by a wonderful reporter in London who gave one on Eastern Europe. And we were all in a state of shock because we realized it was the same companies, the same banks, same hedge funds, same defense contractors operating as syndicate in all three places. We just didn't, we hadn't seen the game because we thought it was just North America or Russia or Eastern Europe. And what we didn't see was there was a global process going on of buying up and controlling all sorts of land and real estate and enterprises, and was very much part of a process of economic warfare that was going on globally.
Well, when these elitists talk about redistribution of wealth, what they really mean is that their goal is to take the United States and take us from our first world nation status and delve us into this second world nation status as they consolidate power, as they gain more power. And I see this system being implemented with this cap and trade scam and now being exposed in climategate. I mean, that's why they created these carbon markets and carbon prices. I mean, that the EU openly trades, European Union. This is about globalization. And I think that this is the next step in this redistribution of how the global economy works. Yes?
Well, let's look at the challenge, whether it's what I'll just call a metaphor for the people running the economy globally. So whether you're Mr. Global or whether you're Jason and Catherine and the people listening to this call. The question is, how do we go from being a world of where resources are very much used by the few and not by the many, and a world where we're having incredible sort of damage from growth in population to the environment on the planet? How do we go to a world where we are living in alignment with each other and with the environment? So how do we go from an unhealthy model to a much more healthy model? And here's the challenge. The question is, how do you incentivize people to do what's good for the environment and do what's much more equitable in terms of sharing of resources? And there are positive systems you can use to do that, Jason. The Solari model says, okay, why don't we finance communities with equity, and then people can make money and get financial wealth from reducing consumption? Because the notion that we need consumption to grow to get the stock market to go up is absurd. That's the corporate model. But in fact, if you finance places with equity, there's enormous financial incentives for all of us to dramatically reduce our consumption in a way that aligns us, and our finances with the environment. Cap and trade is a very different kind of system. It's a taxation system, and it says you can't trust people to do the right thing. So rather than incentivize them with positive, what we're going to do is we're just going to make it very painful and expensive for them to not lower their footprint. But we're going to do it in a way that, one, gives us central control, and two, where we can game the system. So I've always said, if you think that cap and trade would make derivatives look like it was something that Mother Teresa came up with. Because what you're seeing in cap and trade is the worst polluters in the planet being given a get-out-of-jail-free card in exchange for making it much more expensive for the least polluting people. So, for example, Democracy Now! Just had a great description about a month ago of General Motors purchasing of carbon credits in Brazil, and basically, General Motors is free to pollute because the folks in Brazil can no longer hunt or do all sorts of things with land that they've been using for generations. Mm-hmm. So you literally have a system that allows the most polluting to continue to pollute and get a get-out-of-jail-free card by making life miserable for the people who have the lowest footprint.
And exactly, even though they're going to buy these carbon credits, those fees, those costs will then be implemented on the lower class by what they cost. They'll just increase their price. And in fact, now you're seeing around gas stations that if cap and trade is passed, yes, gas will go up 75 cents or $1. And then the left cover is, oh, you must work for the oil industry. That's why you're against cap and trade. That's why you're against a carbon tax. Yet these headlines I have next to me, out of Bloomberg, Shell calls for global expansion of cap and trade CO2 programs. And then we have an Exxon executive calling for the same things. These are of the people that are actually behind this carbon tax system?